been 2 weeks now since I moved to Munich, and in this diary entry I want to talk about my first impressions of my internship and also of living alone in Munich. But I really want to dedicate this video more to the internship because I think it's also interesting for some people who have interest in film and like the film industry in general and really want to get into it but don't know how to do this. And I really wish that I had like an insight from a person that actually worked in a film institution or a film agency. So I think I really want this to be like the main focus of this video. At the same time though, I really do want to share some personal things as well, because obviously the Munich diaries are for subjective reflection and just sort of meant to be a portfolio of my impressions upon the time here, and also how it maybe changed my perceptions of the field that I was aspiring to work at. So let's get into it. So first I just want to say what I'm working exactly. So at the moment I'm interning at a script agency. I still have literally so much ahead of me work-wise. I've only been working for 2 weeks now, but I do believe they did kind of serve as a window into the film industry in Germany at least. So basically what is happening is that we're like the mediator between authors, scriptwriters, and film productions, meaning that we're kind of like the communication channel between these two because they really communicate like directly. And so what we basically do is we help with script analysis, with editing, assisting with editing, and we're just kind of trying to facilitate the contact between aspiring writers or already established writers and the film productions. So I chose this internship because I am at a point in my life where I'm genuinely just really struggling to understand which field is meant for me professionally. I always used to think that I would work in the literary field, maybe in a publishing house or as an editor. But lately I've also been really fascinated by the film industry, and since I study media and culture, which is really focused on film and visual media as well, I have been kind of, looking in different directions, and I thought a script agency would honestly be like the perfect way in between because it combines literature with film. Because I'm working a lot with scripts, at the same time they're meant to be transferred into visual media. So this is kind of just like a really cool opportunity to like test out both fields and see which one I'm most comfortable with working. So before I really get into the work that I'm actually doing, I thought it would be kind of helpful to illustrate what I was imagining would be the work that I do, because of course the description on like the sites where you kind of like can apply for a job, they're always very vague, and I think they're also just of course trying to sell the internship to you so that you're like, oh yeah, that sounds so interesting, let's do this. But of course they're not always relating to reality. So I think it would be good to just quickly say what I thought would be my work. So in the job description it said that I will be working with manuscripts dramaturgically. So what I thought instantly was that I would be able to assist in editing. Of course, I'm not saying that I would be like a huge help or that my input would like really change something really crucial about the outcome, but still I thought that I would be able to give my input and my opinions on the creative aspects. So what I expected was that I would be able to assist in writing dramaturgical analysis or analyses from film adaptations. For example, if there was a novel and the discussion would come up to make it a film or a series, that part of my work would be to, just think about it, like, is it realistic for this book to be a series? What would we have to maybe adapt to the genre of a film? On the other hand, there's also administrative work that I really didn't expect too much of, because this wasn't really a thing that I was really looking forward to. But basically it was all about setting up contracts for authors or production companies, or just, general correspondence between authors and the productions. There I really wasn't at fault, like this was practically what I was expecting it to be. So now let's actually talk about the things I am doing. I will say that my expectations were probably a bit too high, or maybe just because I was projecting my wishes onto that job description so much that in the end it turned out to be a little bit different. As I said, the administrative work is pretty much what I had expected. For example, I'm also responsible for sending out reminders for still unpaid invoices. For example, if we set up a contract between a scriptwriter and a production company, then we're responsible for tracing the invoices and like the outgoing payments. So for example, if the production company still owes the writer a certain amount of money, we're responsible to remind them that there's still money that has to be paid. So this kind of dry work I was aware of, and I was already expecting it. But now to the creative side. So, is it really about editing scripts? No, it's not really about editing scripts. So, basically, what I realized meanwhile is that an agency is not really responsible for the hands-on work on a text. What we're doing is we're just mediating. For example, if an author or scriptwriter is looking for an editor for their script, or for somebody to assess their script, we're not the ones assessing it, we're the ones mediating another author, another professional who will do the job. So we have like all of these contacts in our system and all the authors that we basically represent. So we are able to suggest this author professionals or writers from our databases, but we're not the ones actually doing the creative work. So this is where I was mistaken, and this is still what I'm a little bit sad about. On the other hand, I do kind of get it, because the people I'm working with at the agency are not filmmakers themselves. They are creatives, and they did study something related to visual media and dramaturgy, but they're not the people actually working on the story themselves. So it does kind of make sense for them to maybe give like general input, but not to be able to really pinpoint at the things that the writers have to, you know, improve on their scripts for them to send out to production companies. Something I can say though that we are doing, which is pretty creative, is when, for example, we're receiving a script by a new author, we have to assess it. This assessment is not very detailed, and it's also not written down. It's more something like a book club. So this is something that I really do enjoy. What has happened so far, for example, was that I was able to read 3 newly sent in scripts, and basically my task was to like read it and to think about it and to just give a general feedback on what do I think of that? Like, is this a film? Can this be made a film? Or what does it still lack? Of course, this seems really superficial, but on the other hand, I'm thinking this might be exactly the point of this assessment. As a person who isn't used to the format or like the general structure of film scripts, you will have a very different perspective on it than a person who's reading this 24/7 as their full-time job. Because at this point, it's really not about the details of the script, it's more about like the general feeling you have about it. Are the characters coherent? Is the story somewhat progressing in a way that seems reasonable? Is the general dramaturgy kind of circular? Like, does it make sense to you as a person who would watch this on screen? So these kind of assessments are really amazing to me because they do give you a lot of insight into how scripts are acquired or chosen in the first place. It's not about the fine-tuning yet, it's just about the general yes or no. And there I do actually have a say, and this is something that I'm really happy about and that I really do enjoy a lot about my work. The general lore that I can take from these 2 weeks in this internship is that working in an agency is not precisely creative. It can be creative in some respect, but mainly it's really about managing communication, which is also interesting because you are still getting a glimpse into the world and the industry. At the same time, if you're a person who really wants to work on their own and wants to create, I don't think this will be a job for you. Of course, there's also something else playing into this, which is the capitalization of art. Because of course in the film industry, at least in Germany, I can only talk about Germany, but I do assume it's internationally like that, you will have to live with the fact that art is being commercialized, and so not every artwork is being appreciated the way it should be appreciated. For example, I read this treatment about this body horror film that was absolutely disgusting, but that wasn't a criteria for me to say it was bad, because I actually really enjoyed reading it, because it was doing something with me, right? Like, it did have an effect on me, and I think good art just has an effect on you, whether good or bad. But if it manages to stir something in you, and if it manages to like trigger a response, it does work, right? So we were discussing this, and when I said my opinion and said that I really loved the premise because of its absurdity, another colleague said that they found it really appalling and disgusting and that it would never sell. So it's kind of really just, you know, on the shelf. Like, we're not going to discuss this any further because it's not going to work anyway, because it is an industry after all. And this is something that I of course knew before, but seeing it like so realistically in front of me in the form of a discussion, it kind of made me realize it even more. Something that I really also wanted to point out was that if you're struggling with sending out your manuscript to an agency, don't. Please just don't. Because I'm also a person that's really reluctant to like get my stuff out there and to, you know, want others to read my stories. Not just because I'm thinking, well, maybe the stories aren't good enough, because maybe the presentation isn't good enough, maybe it's not professional enough. But let me just tell you that some of the treatments and concepts that I have read so far are really, really far from being perfect in any way. I'm not just talking about the design in general, I'm also talking about the grammar actually. You wouldn't believe that some scriptwriters are not good at writing. I literally thought script writing was like a really elevated craft that kind of presupposed that you are a good writer before you can be a good screenwriter. I have seen scripts that aren't even linguistically good, in the way that you could understand what they're trying to say, but it wasn't flawless, right? So I just really want to encourage you to still get your stories out there, because you're gonna be fine. You know, at this point, these agencies are looking for new and fresh perspectives, new voices, interesting concepts. Being a scriptwriter is not the same thing as being a novelist. This is what I want to tell you with this. There's very different criteria and very different standards that I believe I witnessed and will also probably witness in the last 2.5 months. I would assume, I'm not going to say that I know that, but I think that in screenwriting, it's really more about your concept and the story than it is about the style, because the world building happens on screen. It doesn't happen on paper only, whereas in writing books or novels, it mainly depends on the way you phrase things in your head and how you write them down. This is establishing the world you're trying to convey, whereas in film, it is not. You know, for this you have cinematographers, camera people, directors, and I don't want to reduce the role of a screenwriter to just give a story. No, I don't think so, but if that's what you're worried about, I wouldn't worry about it. So please get your stories out there, and I'm sure that you're gonna be great. So these so far are my impressions on my internship work. I will say that I really, really do enjoy it so far, even though maybe it didn't reach exactly what I was expecting. At the same time, I really love that I'm just confronted with reality, so that later on I do know what I want to do, or where I should apply, or where maybe I shouldn't apply. The second part of this video I want to dedicate to my personal impressions of living alone in Munich. This is probably going to be a little bit shorter than the other part, because basically I haven't been living too much yet because I've just been working. But what I can say so far is that Munich truly is a very, very beautiful city. I've only been to the city center, to the Isar, which is like the river passing through here. I went to a gallery, it's called the Pinakotheken. I personally went to the old one, where they have this beautiful Renaissance exhibition. I also went to a neighboring museum, it's the Museum of Ancient Egyptian Art, exactly. And as an Egyptian, I couldn't resist but go inside. A tip I want to give you is, when you go to museums in Munich on Sundays, you only pay €1. So this is something that you should definitely consider. But so far, I haven't gotten around to meeting any new people. I do have a friend that also lives here, which I've known from home, which is currently studying her master's here, so we do occasionally meet up. Actually, this week, like next week, today's Sunday, I do have a date with a person I met on Bubble Friends, so I'm really excited for this, and maybe it's gonna be a cool encounter. I will say that working at the agency is also kind of influencing me in my free time, because reading all these scripts and all these ideas is honestly just absolutely inspirational to me, and it just really encourages me to also work on my own projects. For example, I'm currently writing a novel, or I'm working on writing a novel, let's say it like that. I've always been struggling if I want to make it a novel or a screenplay, and I've kind of just thought that I would write a novel because I was just always thinking that writing a screenplay is like a crazy hard craft, but reading these scripts, I kind of feel a little bit less worried. This is kind of a, I would say, passive way of educating yourself if you're just consuming work how you would one day want to do it yourself. And I must say that I have had the urge once or twice after work to just sit in my bed after dinner, open my laptop, and to just kind of work on my own story. So this is also something that I gotta say really makes me so happy here, and I consider myself a professional procrastinator who just always have so many ideas but just doesn't find the time to actually implement them. But just being surrounded by all this creative energy and by all these amazing scripts and ideas, I do honestly feel the urge to also create more. I think that's kind of a nice wrap up for this video. I really hope this was interesting. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I hope this could give some kind of insight to how a script agency is working, what you're actually doing there, what the nature of the work actually is. Of course, as I said, there's still so much time ahead of me. I'll probably also update this perspective that I just shared with you because it will probably change over time. But I think as a first impression, that was already something. And if I could already answer one or two questions that somebody already had about how a script agency is working, because they were thinking of also applying for an internship or actually working there, then that's sufficient for me. Now, I really wish you all a great day. I hope you can enjoy the great weather. And yeah, then see you next time. Bye!